Hi everyone, and a very warm welcome to this special episode and final episode of the first series of the Learning Journeys podcast from Lacuna Learning. We hope you're all keeping really well, and in today's episode we are delighted to be joined by none other than Professor Richard Cheetham MBE, Lord Mayor of Cheveley Services. No introduction could ever do the Cheatmeister justice, so I will keep it short and let him tell it as it really is. Richard is a coach and coach developer and is currently a senior teaching fellow in sports coaching at the University of Winchester. He was an amateur cyclist, raced at a pretty good level in France in the 80s. I was allowed to give the decade out. I did check that before I started. He coached rugby in New Zealand and toured with different age group teams for a number of years. He was awarded UK Coaching Coach Developer of the Year in 2018 and then was given an MBE for services to education and community sport in 2017. His main interests are in creativity and play, encouraging people to think differently with a deep passion for learner engagement. I first met Richard in 2015 at the UK Coaching Summit in Wales. We then, through various things, became collaborators and mischief mates in my work in triathlon and canoeing and various other things. We've had more than the odd bike ride and climb and one career-changing crash, which we might talk about later. He is an outstanding coach, educator. He is a role model of mine and a massive inspiration to a huge number of people. So delighted to have him along to share his journey. So thanks for your time, Richard.
Thank you very much, Doug. It's an absolute pleasure. I'm remembering already This Is Your Life with Eamon, can't remember the second name now was, and they'd invite people in and they go, do you remember? And I was out the doors, you'd come. And they go, do you remember Doug? Oh yeah, hi Doug, how are you? They bring your family and they was bringing somebody, you don't remember that, do you? This Is Your Life.
I do, yeah.
Yeah. I kind of wonder who's going to come out the doors next. There'll be Rusty in there, my old PE teacher, probably, I don't know, somebody else.
It's an interesting start to the pod. So Richard, by way of warming you up and the now regular feature on the pod, question for you that everyone has been asked. I am more than a little bit intrigued to see what you say here. If you could go on an adventure anywhere in the world, where would you go? Who would you go with? And what would you do?
Well, I'd like to go back to South America. I'd like to go to Torres del Paine, right down the bottom of South America. It's beautiful climbing. I think some biking trails around there, walking trails. It's the one place I didn't get to, or one of the places I didn't get to. And when I've seen a lot of the climbing films and documentaries, it's just beautiful. I take my daughter and we take our bikes and we take our open, adventurous minds with us. There you go. We play plenty of Jaffa cakes as well because she likes Jaffa cakes.
I love that the quality of the snacks was a significant thought for you in that adventure. That's brilliant. No one's mentioned Jaffa cakes
yet. Listen, it's important to her, you know. It's there you go. That's the first thing I remember when Nikki's say to her, what is it about on Wednesdays when you pick her up from school? Pick and mix Wednesdays. I said, yeah, it's important to her. She said, yeah, I took her and it is important. She took all of her time to choose 200 grams every Wednesday and a bit few of this. You know, it's important to her. Jaffa cake's important to her.
I should at this point in the pod, of course, say other cakes and biscuits are available, but Jaffa cakes are very fine.
Sorry about that.
It's all right. It was a hilarious opening to what I think will be a hilarious podcast. So,
it's not a sponsored.
Not a sponsored podcast. No, it's not. No, not important enough for that. Okay, so I feel like people know you, but I feel like they really know you, and I don't think I know this story. So I'm really excited to ask you. So you've been in sport most of your life, all your life. Where did it all start, and where did it lead you?
Well, I suppose it starts in that wonderful position that we find ourselves in now, where we are the ones that create environments for others to look back on and go, yeah, they really helped me. That was them that helped me get into it. And I had a PE teacher called Mr. Bruff at secondary school back in 1976. And, he inspirational, role model probably. We use the word inspiration, but he just encouraged us and just, he wanted you to be in the team, but he knew I was good at cricket and liked playing rugby. And he just made sure that it was a place outside of the classroom that you could thrive in. It was a place where people really could just do something different. And I've spoken about him a few times, but he probably wouldn't remember. But just encouraged. And then from there on, my dad was a good cricketer. So I played for local cricket in Somerset at the time. Was Ian Botham and Joel Garner, Viv Richards, those kind of role models. And I just remember when I was 8 years old, I don't know what it is about riding bikes, but it's the view from my dad's house still is what I call Ice Cream Mountain. It's about 3 miles away, and it's basically where the soil and the rock have sort of gone separate ways, and the rock is a pinky and white colour, and I used to call it Ice Cream Mountain, and I set myself a challenge of cycling there when I was 9. And then I set myself a challenge of cycling halfway to Yeovil, and then I set myself a challenge of cycling all the way to Yeovil without having a cup of tea in Ilchester. And then that one thing led to another. Chose a college that wasn't the one that all my friends went to. It was just a local college, and I didn't get a bus pass, so I cycled to college 10 miles each way. And the local bike shop said, why don't you join a ride, join a race, join a club? So Jerry Barlow took me under his wing, and that was it. That was the start. How I ever still continued after that grim day in Burnham-on-Sea when I hunger knock 40 miles from home and was in a very dark place. But there must be something about cycling that made me want to go back.
Yeah, wow. What an amazing intro. So a place outside the classroom you could thrive in. Love that kind of idea. Ice Cream Mountain. Wow, what a lovely term for that. I just love this idea of these little incremental challenges. Can I go a bit further? Could I grow my challenge in some way? So you kind of got into cycling, I suppose, just through happenstance. Where did that lead you next? How did we end up in France?
I ended up in France. So we trained with the Yeovil Cycling Club and the Taunton Cycling Club. We'd end up going out. They raced together, we trained together, and then Taunton was twinned with Lisieux in France. And they said, why don't we spend the summer going over there? And I left college, didn't want to go to university, and decided to take up a training manager's job for Sainsbury's. So I saved up the money, and then we went out for 3 weeks in Lisieux, and we raced for this team, and it was just unbelievable. We raced all these big races, and I kind of won my first race, and it went downhill from there. But we rode Kermesses, Nocturnes, big premier races, and then we sort of got drunk on Bastille Day celebrations, and I handed my notice. I wrote my notice into Sainsbury's. Wrote my letter to Sainsbury's. Said I didn't want to go back to work. I'd find my place riding bikes for a living. Sadly, I didn't do it, but I still had that wonderful experience. Came back and then went back to college and then on to higher education.
Yeah, wow. You've always talked about the riding being there, but I never knew quite how it happened. So it's really cool to hear it. This real sense of an apprenticeship and kind of growing up and doing those cool things that I suppose you would always look back if you hadn't done it and gone, I just wonder if I'd gone over to France and given it a go and seen what happened. So, okay, so you didn't go to uni, so you got a proper job sort of. Then you went and did some riding, and so that was brilliant. Now I'm going to go back. And so you did then go to university. So what happened next?
So I did a sandwich course. I got sort of business and sport experience, and I did so each summer I went back to France to race. I was never going to make it. I just went back because I went back to a different area. Went to the Auvergne and raced for a club in Aurillac, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I was working, and my placement went back each summer. And then when I graduated, I sort of started a leisure management course and a leisure management career, I suppose, working at a local leisure centre. And then I went from a local leisure centre to a technical college that wanted teachers who had sort of vocational, industrial experience. So I taught on a BTEC leisure and sport programme. And, that's really sort of where my teaching career took off, really. I remember having a teacher when I was studying thinking, man, is that the best you can do? Is that it? Thinking, I could do a much better job than that. I'm not in an arrogant way, but I'll tell you the story. He said, right, it was about leisure management. So he drew a wave machine. Wave machine you get in leisure centres? He drew 3 wavy lines on a whiteboard. I thought, wow, is that it? Is that it? Is that as creative as you can get? So I always thought, okay, I'm sure I could do a better job than that. And hopefully I have done. Yeah,
no, I love that. I can almost see like the extension of I'll cycle to Ice Cream Mountain, I'll cycle without a cup of tea, I'll just do a bit more, so we'll do this and I'll go do BTEC leisure management teaching, and then I'll go do something else. So I'm dead interested. Somewhere along the line, you then found yourself in New Zealand. How did you get from teaching squiggly lines and wave machines in college to being coaching and working in New Zealand and stuff?
So I did a master's alongside my teaching job at a technical college, a FE college, and had been teaching there for 6 years and doing a master's part-time. And in that time I had a prolapsed disc, quite a bad injury. And I had a student who, and his brother, who had cousins in New Zealand, and their family invited me round one summer because I think I had quite a good rapport with the people I taught, and always interested in how they were doing after they left. And they said, come round, we've got to show you our photographs from our holiday in New Zealand. And so I went round, and they very kindly cooked me tea and showed me the pictures of New Zealand and bungee jumping and this park, the steam came out of the ground, and rafting and all these things. Oh, I've got to go there. So I think I had decided really at that point that after the challenges of doing a master's part-time, driving up from Basingstoke to London once a week, the injury, which had really been quite attritional, it had been quite uncomfortable. I'd been pretty much, I'd sit in a classroom and I'd be 15 minutes on the floor, 15 minutes in a chair, 50 minutes on the floor, 50 minutes in a chair. In my stats lecture, there you go. And I kind of suppose just needed to now or never moment really, and rented my house out and had some savings and been inspired by this students and this family, and said, go and you can stop off in Auckland and stay with our cousins. And so that was it. I just, now or never really, but like France, never look back on something you wish you'd done really. You don't get two chances, you don't get two paths, you get one path. And Sainsbury's was the turn I maybe should have made, because it made me realise that I could never see myself doing that. And that's no disrespect to the career, but it wasn't, those shoes didn't fit me.
So tell me about your time in New Zealand. What did you get up to when you were out there, and how did that lead you, I guess, to what you do now?
Well, I suppose, I'd worked in the leisure and tourism department at sport leisure and tourism department at Basingstoke College, and I'd always been, I remember this teacher saying, I'd love to fly to Argentina to see these waterfalls. And I said, well, you go all the way to Argentina just to see some waterfalls? And she went, yeah, that's what you do when you like travelling. And I got it. I understood it. I now understand Iguazu Falls, on the borders of Argentina, Paraguay, Brazil, is still on my list of things I will do one day. And so I had that opportunity, and I took 6 months, a rucksack full of clothes. I probably thinking I was going to a place that didn't have clothes shops. So I rapidly changed from sort of smart clothes into that real traveller. And I just went around the North and South Island of New Zealand. I stayed with a guy I did my master's with, who was out there for a year. Worked on a dairy farm for 3 weeks. And they just went everywhere and anywhere. I mean, when you go to a hostel and so you must go here, Hot Water Beach, you must go to Watomo Caves. And it was literally that free, that one time in your life where you could turn left and right whenever you wanted to experience that freedom and experience that not worrying about anything was one that I really cherish, and I think I'm blessed to have had that.
Yeah, I can kind of hear that in your voice, that real sort of joyful feeling of that time. Now, listeners are interested, Cheats, because coaching is a pretty big part of your life, and thus far you haven't really talked much about coaching. Did coaching start in New Zealand, or did it start after that? How did coaching fit into that story?
Well, I think coaching did start in New Zealand, ironically. I suppose my master's was in sports science, and at the local rugby club, after I stopped playing, wanted to stay involved, so I worked alongside the coaches and did the strength and conditioning. I call it field conditioning really, and I didn't have a gym there, so a lot of it was functional training and warm-ups, and obviously skills embedded in as well. And when I went to New Zealand the first time, it was purely to travel, and I got so hooked that I came back. And this is part of the story. I haven't told this for years, but anyway, so I came back, didn't have a job. I had a friend of mine, James Crantle, who was at the Olympics. I'd studied my masters with him, and I'd always promised that I'd go to watch him in the final in Sydney. So I saved my money up, worked in a watercress factory, did some part-time teaching because that travel bug had bitten me. And I did a car boot sale once, actually, and I remember putting a sign up saying I'm going to the Olympics, and people thought I was actually going to the Olympics. and were giving me money, not because they wanted to buy things, but they thought I must have been an athlete going to the Olympics, and I actually wasn't. But they were chucking money at me, like, oh, you good luck in the Olympics. And I go, well, I'm actually just going to watch a friend. So anyway, saving money up, house was still rented out. My last place on my visit list in New Zealand had been a week in Australia with my cousin. And, somebody had said, when you go away travelling, you'll find something. There'll be an answer. And 5.5 months, I couldn't find that answer. And the last week, I got the answer. And after going to Australia, I thought the answer is to travel more. So I came back, didn't go back to the job that had been offered open to me. And I flew to Perth. I was at a payphone on Rottnest Island for an hour and 3/4 on the online ticket for the Olympic final to watch James Cracknell in the rowing final with Steve Redgrave, Matthew Pinsent and Tim Foster. And then that was it. My travels, I flew to Sydney, went to Olympics, there you go. Not as a participant,
Listen,
as a spectator.
Never let the truth tell a good story, right?
That's right, don't let the truth get away with a good story. But unfortunately, it was the truth. And so that was great. And then I carried on travelling, went back. And I think one thing about travel is that it obviously opens your eyes, opens your mind. You meet wonderful people. You look at the life you are currently having and the one that you've experienced. And of course, I wanted to travel more. So I applied for my residency in New Zealand and I managed to get my residency, which took me a year. So I was part-time teaching, coaching back at Basingstoke, working for the England under-19s in the preparation for their World Cup and Six Nations. World Cup was in Chile. I got the invitation when I was doing some supply teaching at school near Reading and said, do you want to go and work with England under-19s for their Six Nations and World Cup? And it's kind of like, why did you need to ask me that question? So when that finished, I then took my residency up, flew to New Zealand and just remember putting my details on a teaching website when I was following the British Lions tour around Australia, and I was in an internet cafe and I put my teaching details on the, I can't remember the website, Ed Gazette New Zealand I think it was, and said, look, I'm looking for a job. Was offered a job the next day and I said, look, I can't start work tomorrow because it's important. I've got 2 more test matches to watch. So they said, yeah, that's fine, we understand. So I watched the 2nd and 3rd test of the British Lions series, flew out via Melbourne, landed in Palmerston North. And then I hope your listeners are still listening, but then it's, I suppose I was saying it's because it's not as simple as, leaving and getting a job. And really what I found in New Zealand that I wanted to get involved in rugby and coaching was the thing that fitted me really. Sports science was important, but something about coaching that was a better fit for me.
Okay, so coaching is obviously what you're known for, but people probably didn't know that first part of the story. I'm so glad we took the time to actually ask you and you to relive that, so thank you for sharing.
Yeah. I didn't know I went to the Olympics yet. As an Olympian.
yeah, you went to the Olympics. Yeah, it's not quite as good as Leslie McKenna's. I inadvertently qualified for the 2010 Olympic Games, but it's certainly in the mix, right? So New Zealand, you then came back. Now, did you go into coaching or did you go into teaching? How did it all come together?
Yeah, so I just came. I came back and I only had a part-time hours. So really Six Nations and World Cup with England 19s. And of course, that wasn't full time. That was the duration of the preparation for the Six Nations and the Junior World Cup, which was in South Africa, I think, 2005. So I did some part-time supply teaching, and then I applied for a job at the University of Winchester on a sport development degree, and then realised that actually it needed a coaching degree. So I wrote the coaching degree, and then from coaching my local club, became a coach developer educator with the RFU, and then. I suppose that, it's about presenting to an audience where you need one person in that audience who says, I really like that. And then I got an invitation to go to the Belfry at a coach developers presentation. Andrew Gillett was due to be there. And my presentation was different, as you can imagine. And we started with a massive game of Jenga. So I bought massive Jenga, stuck it on the desk in front of 26 coach developers from netball to rugby to cycling, and we played big Jenga. And it went down a storm such that Paul Moss, who you know Paul?
Very well, yeah.
Good old Paul. And I told this story that I represented Great Britain at Jenga And that when you go to international tournaments, your Jenga pieces have to be made from trees that are natural to the country you come from. So Norwegian pine, if you're in the Norwegian team, and this Jenga was made from English oak, and that I'd made them myself, and if you wanted to buy one, you could buy them. And he sent me an email saying, can I buy one of your Jengas? So I sold a tail, but actually I sent him one.
Did you?
As a gift. Yeah, I did, yeah. And he'll always remember it.
So I know Mossy for a number of years. So I worked with Paul Moss in triathlon. He's now at UK Anti-Doping. If he's listening to this, he'll probably be horrified you just told that story. But it's a great story, and I suppose one of the features that I suppose you're well known for is taking a really different approach. When you said you took Jenga out, I wasn't even remotely surprised because you're very well known for that. I guess I'm interested, creativity is something you're really interested in, something you use a lot. Where did that come from in your practice as a coach and coach developer?
Yeah, I think that's been asked before, and I suppose I really would like to delve down to the origins. My dad was a physics lecturer. That sort of seemed to be very black and white. I shouldn't say that really, but I don't know where it came from. I think it's just, and I can't think of the origins, but I don't want to do it that way. I don't like. I can see it. I do it better. Why don't we do this? Like I can't sit in front of that and listen that way. I need to do this. And I remember going to a conference up in Glasgow, a presenter, 9:00 on a Monday morning. I may have told you the story. And a very renowned speaker, Irish Sharpness, who it was, not fair. And after 10 minutes, I needed to go. I had to go to the toilet. I didn't actually need to go out. I came back in and it was still carrying on. And then I left after half an hour, and I didn't go back to any of the presenting after that, because I just thought, yeah, I know you know a lot, but you got to remember there's somebody listening to you. You got to spark that. You got to, if you're presenting to an audience, you have to touch them in the sense that part of their life they can relate to, that they're listening to it going, yeah, I felt that, I know that. Cool, that's the same as me. That's a great idea. And then get them to do, involve the audience. I just didn't want to be traditional. I thought there's so much scope for diversity, and I stood in front of those coach developers at the Belfry and with massive Jenga, and never regarded it as a risk. I knew that it would work. I just wanted to do something different. Of course, it feeds itself, because you get ideas. Ideas we know like rabbits, and we know what rabbits do.
I knew at some point he was going to get in the rabbits thing. He says that to me quite a lot. Yeah, that just interested. A lot of things you said in there, I encourage people to listen back to that last little section you just shared there. I just don't want to do it that way. You've got to remember that somebody's listening to you, and that I just didn't want to be traditional, that real rejection of, I guess, traditional ways of doing things. And as I've heard this story, that kind of theme just keeps coming back through, that real, I wonder if we could do it differently. And so I guess with that in mind a little bit, I'm wondering what advice or thoughts or ideas you've got for maybe new coaches and coach developers coming through, given, I guess, the really amazing journey that you've been on. What sort of advice or thoughts might you have for them?
I would like to narrow this down, and I'm glad that I'm actually glad that I've been asked that question, because it's not a long response. But there's work we've been doing a lot recently, which is understand someone's experience. When you're coaching, when you're teaching, how close can you get to the experience of those you are coaching and teaching? Be the audience. What are they seeing? And we just done Rubik's Cube this morning with the first years. They were each given a Rubik's Cube. I've done this quite a few times. Well, actually, it's a few groups. So they give them a Rubik's Cube, and I purely want them to experience what it's like when somebody's given something that is a challenge, and what it's like to learn. Oh, when I was trying to do it, I found this. I now know what you're going through. And if you can really genuinely reach out and understand someone's experience, ask them, look at the cues they're giving you, they will give you an idea of how they're learning, what they're learning, where their engagement is. We talk a lot about engagement. And when you say engagement, yeah, I get engagement. What's engagement feel like? Well, I'm involved, I'm happy, I'm active. I feel I can share my ideas. I haven't stopped. We've been, the minute you walked in, we haven't stopped. What time is it? Oh yeah, well, didn't realise we run out of time. I'll come back next week. All these ingredients in what engagement is like. So, summed up really, understand someone's experience. Because they will talk of you, they will talk about you, they will reflect, and they will say, you know what? We went on this bike ride, mad bike ride. And we'll talk about that story later. But that's it, really. And I want to be able to do that. I want to do that. I just spoken to some students this morning. How are you getting on with online learning? What are the challenges? And they have a clear dialogue. They feel open. They can talk about anxieties. They can talk about success. I need to get close to that because I'm not them.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I was hoping for a good answer, and you did not disappoint there. That is an absolute belter. Understand someone's experience. I've just written down a few things there in my notes. Something around empathy, just seeing the world as they see it, not as you see it. I love that. How close to the experience of that person can you get? How close can you get to what it's like for them? Because if you can get close to that, you'll be in a really good place. What does engagement feel like? And I just love this idea, and it resonates a lot with the work I'm doing at the moment around, learning is done by the learner. We can't actually design learning. What we can do, though, is we can create experiences that we hope will lead to learning. And therefore, we should spend a lot of time and energy thinking about, well, what is the quality of that experience that you're giving somebody? And I think that's one of the things that you're just outstanding at doing consistently is how do I create experiences that might allow somebody to connect with something or engage with something? It's, a rare gift, Richard, it must be said. I'm interested, and we're way over time, but we always knew we were going to run over time. I'm really interested. You talk about engagement a lot. This is what Rusty would ask you, I think. What is the best engagement you've ever had in a session? What is the moment you thought, oh my goodness, we've got this?
Well, I think you're probably going to know what I'm going to say, don't you? A room full of grown adults blowing balloons up. That was it, and I know, that I'm probably, people may associate Dobble and balloons as the things, but yeah, it just, I don't use it now, but it was a variety of audiences and it just never ceased to amaze me because what happened was, it's about layering. I know the layer, we'll do this next and this happened next. And actually it brought this amazing connection between the group. And I could just see grown adults being given that excuse to kind of just I'll talk about that somewhere I've just written recently, taking their armour off, and feeling uninhibited in terms of expressing themselves, understanding why we're doing it. That's real engagement. Real engagement. There's 67 people in a workshop in Vancouver in Canada, where they originally started walking past the room where I was presenting to go to other conference presentations and saw the melee that was taking place and decided to turn left and come in my room. Not because I was brilliant or because other presenters were dull, but because there was something the curiosity of what was happening. And it was full of people connecting through that. And that's probably one of the best ones, yeah. I do have other ones. But...
Oh yeah, loads. Do you know, it's one of
ideas.
It's one of my proudest moments was when we got the pleasure of running something together. And I suggested something that was so out there, even you were concerned, which was just to open by playing Frisbee. But it did the same thing as the balloons. It brought people together. It brought connections. It got rid of armour and all that kind of stuff. I suppose a lot of people see, you're a huge figure on Twitter these days. You've got a lot of followers and stuff. People would see your Dobble and balloons and think that's what you do. And I suppose if I had a message for anyone, because I know you quite well now, there's a lot more to it than that. That's kind of the tip of the iceberg. But actually, it's the thinking behind that is hard. And one of your catchphrases to me is always, Doug, it takes a lot of planning to appear this disorganised. And the point you're making is it can appear very free-flowing and you'd be forgiven for thinking you can just make it up as you go along. But actually, having seen how hard you work behind everything you do, there's massive amounts of thought and consideration and contextual understanding that you're trying to build before you break out balloons or Dobble or Jenga or whatever you do.
Yeah, I think, listen, I suppose that one of the problems we have is that, and I have read this recently, and I think it was, I can't remember, maybe Stu Dixon posted it, I'm not quite sure, but I've heard it more often than not that academic journal articles sometimes written in a language I can't access, I'm thinking, why can't we just translate it to somebody who wants to use that information? So sometimes I see myself as a translator, in other words. To the coaches I work with and the students I work with, there's underpinning, there's rationale always there, and it's, I suppose that the thing I used before is that I know what I'm going to teach, but it's the how I teach, which is the bit I always like. Okay, so they always know that, and often we do the how together. So the information I need to teach is this, I need to teach this, but How are we going to do it? Well, that's the exciting bit. Why don't we do that? Why don't we do Rubik's Cube? Why don't we just do... We did London Underground on Monday. Fantastic. You want to work on deceleration, change the direction, create London Underground on lines in the sports hall floor. Every time they stop, they have to tell you a landmark of what part of London they've been to. Social distancing, so they go down the line, the same line as somebody else. They can't 2 meters apart. Peripheral vision, all the different things in there. It's an adaptive game. So I think that when we're in a privileged position to be able to do research, we've got to make sure that every layer from the coach on the sidelines as a volunteer parent right the way through to higher levels are able to access what it is that we found to support them in a language they can understand, and be able to say, not what does that look like, be able to say, I get it, it looks like this.
Oh, thanks, Richard. Now, as with all my guests, we could just carry on chatting forever and it would be brilliant. Alas, we are at the end of our amazing conversation, and I'm just so grateful to you for your time and for sharing your journey with us and sharing a lot of your wisdom and insights. Now, there's a lot in here, and I'm going to really struggle to summarise this. I suppose if we go back to the beginning, I love that, finding that place outside the classroom you could thrive in. And to me, a lot of the creativity and ideas that I think you come up with stem from having kind of changed the notion of what a classroom might be. This idea of growing the challenges, so creating new and bigger challenges all the time. I love this thing you said earlier, you're always interested in people after they leave what you do. So this lovely idea that actually they're much more to you than that. You went to the Olympics, so we'll just stick that on the recording. You know, you went to the Olympics.
Yeah.
I mean, how you went there, under what capacity is just details, right? Semantics.
Car boot sales.
We won't remind Paul Moss about the Jenga any more than we already have.
He likes that story.
Does he like that story? Okay, that's good.
Every time we meet,
I'll have to share it with him and tell him
we're
thinking the best of him. He's doing some lovely work at UKED. And then we just talked about where does this creativity come from, and that kind of rejection of traditional ways of doing things and just finding other ways. And I suppose for me, the real bit I'm sitting with now is this idea of how do you understand somebody's experience? How close to the experience of that person can you get? And if you can do that, then you're going to be in a really great place. Thank you so much for your time. People are going to want to catch up with you. Probably people listening to this already follow you, but where can we keep an eye on what you're up to? Where can people get hold of you? Where can they ask you questions?
I can always email me. So that's richard.cheetham@winchester.ac.uk. Twitter is @2willprof, 2 as in TWO. Instagram, which is 2willprofessor. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm always happy for people to come and they do come and sit in sessions and watch and join, ask my students. Lots of coaches that come down, which is great. You know, Dan Cox today popped down and have a nice chat. The difficulties of coming on campus at the moment are obviously the situation we find ourselves in with COVID. But once that passes, they're always welcome to come and sit and watch. And if I can help, I will more than happy to share ideas and things that I've done. And, Doug, it is reciprocal because, I talk about marry well. We've spoken about this before, marry well. Marriage is not the marriage of a church marriage. It's the marrying of ideas, marriages of mavericks and free-thinking spirits and souls that when you invite somebody up to throw tennis balls at your athletes, that you're more than happy for me to come and do it. And that's what we did. We've thrown tennis balls and tennis ball tubes and we've messed around, and Craig Morris has then brought in Swiss balls and messed around. So, I think what I'm always very, very hugely grateful for is that it's reciprocal. I said to students, I'll learn as much from you as you'll learn from me. Your invitation after we met in Cardiff, has opened wonderful doors and met wonderful people. I have ideas I've never thought of. And so, and this isn't waxing lyrical because you're here, but it's that true adventure, that creativity takes you to places that you didn't think you would go to, really. And I just think, listen, I've made loads of mistakes. I know that. I mean, we did some stuff this morning. And I knew it wasn't working, but we spoke about it. And by the time we finished, we did that reflection in action. We changed it, upped it, spoke about it, finished on something that we were really happy with. So, it's a pleasure. And Eamon Andrews, this year's your life. That's what we spoke about at the beginning.
It was, yeah. Listen, folks, I very much encourage you to keep an eye on what he's up to. He's always happy to talk to people with ideas and so on. He's just a very open character. So I very much encourage you to do that. It is the end of the first series. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the engagement. It's been really fun doing it. I'm just delighted that anybody has actually listened. So thank you very, very much for that. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation with Richard. There will be a second series. Just keep an eye on my Twitter feed to see exactly how and when we're going to do that. And obviously keep an eye out for the future podcasts and hit subscribe to make sure that you never miss out. And obviously everybody, please stay safe.